Hi guys, time for another fly tying lesson today. Today we're going to be working with deer hair. I'm going to teach you how to spin it onto the hook. We can actually create bodies with deer hair. The cool thing about deer hair and elk hair is that the hair is actually hollow in the fibers of the hair. So they give it a good flotational quality. That's why you typically see on the dry flies, you'll see elk hair caddis, deer hair caddis, and that's why, because the hair actually being hollow in the middle actually has air in it, and it helps the fly float on top of the water. So again, elk hair caddis, that's why they're using this stuff, because it has a good flotational quality. So now you can see here that I've laid down a nice base wrap, as I always do. No gaps on the hook, and again I'm using the Alec Jackson 1.5/0 gold steelhead hook. I'm using 6/0 black thread here. Now, for those of you that are going to have problems when you're starting to tie deer hair on, it requires a lot of pressure. So one of the problems that you're going to run into, and this was one of the big problems that I had, was that 6/0 thread actually is sometimes not as easy to work with when you're working with deer hair. You really have to apply a lot of pressure. You're going to break it. Your hair is going to fall off. It's going to go all over the place. So one of the things that I use, and I have it in my box here, and I'll show you this real quick before we get started here, is I have two choices. I have Danville's 3/0 wax. Don't know if you can see that. Can you zoom into that there? That is the thread when you're first starting to spin deer hair that you want to use right there, guys. That one right there. It's 3/0, it's waxed, it holds the deer hair good, it does not break unless you're really reefing on a thing. The better you get with spinning deer hair, then you can jump up to the 6/0 thread, and black, just regular non-waxed is fine. You don't have to have that, but like I say, for starters, this is a good choice here if you just want to practice, or you know, if you're still in the intermediate stage of it and you're having problems with your thread breaking, that's what you do, guys, right there. So that's just a little bit rundown on the thread there. So okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of the tools that I spoke about in my tools video. One of them being the hair stacker here. Now I could go to my big old giant hair stacker here, but it's really not necessary, because as you can see, the hair is not nearly as big as the stacker is. This stacker here is primarily used for really long spay hackle, or really long deer hair in particular. So this one here, if you notice, the hair stacker is roughly about the same size as the deer hair. Really, that's where you want to be on your hair stacker. This is my primary hair stacker right here, so one I use the most, because it's the most effective on most of the hair that I'm using. So anyway, let's get started here. Oh, one more tool. This is the deer hair comb. It started out as a mustache comb, and I want to say Dave Hughes is the one who invented this or brought it to light. Don't quote me on that exactly. I may be wrong. Dave, if I've misquoted myself, I apologize for that. Okay, Dave? Sorry, but you're a great fly fisherman, by the way, and I love you. Anyway, so we're going to use this tool here, and it's very important. I'm going to show you exactly how to use it and what you need to do. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to take a piece of deer hair here, and I'm going to pick off a group of hair that is about, I'd say maybe, if you could roll it up nice and tight, it would measure about between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch here. And I'm going to snip that right off at the base there. Now you might have some uneven ends on the end there. Now that's okay. Now here's exactly what I'm going to do. I've snipped it off. I'm holding it with this finger. Pay attention to this very closely, guys, because this is the most important part. You want to grab these tips out here, and you might lose a couple of fibers in there. That's okay. That's why we grabbed about 1/4 inch in them. Now here's where this tool comes in handy right here, guys. Watch this. Now zoom into this so you can see the dander. Okay, zoom right in onto that as close as you possibly can while it's still in focus. Now you can see, guys, in this deer hair there's going to be some dander in there, and I'm going to actually comb that dander out of there. We don't have exactly even tips here. I'm not concerned with that. What I'm concerned with is I'm going to try to get all of that dander out of this deer hair. Watch this. The comb goes in, I just bury it right down into the elk hair. Now watch. Here it comes. It comes out. You got to apply a little pressure here, but there you go. See that dander right there? That makes it extremely hard to work with deer hair when that stuff is in the way. You gotta get it out of there. So, okay, so you can pull back a little bit there now. I'm gonna go ahead and just strip this dander out of here. We're gonna save that. Actually, we're gonna throw that away. And okay, so now I'm gonna start combing this through. See how it goes through nice and easy? Now we know the dander is out of there. I'm picking up a little bit more. Okay, it's very critical when you're spinning deer hair or working with deer hair in general to get all of that dander out of there. Now, I'm going to take it with the other hand, and I'm going to try to keep all these fibers together here, and I'm going to work from the butt side now. This is the butt side, this is the tip side. So when I'm talking about tips and butts, that's what I'm talking about. And I did not say the other word and butts, I said tips and butts. Okay, so now we go through the deer hair and we pull it out this way. Okay, so yeah, nothing really coming out there. Let's go back at it one more time here. And I'll keep it all together. Not so critical. If you lose one or two hairs, that's fine. If the tips aren't exactly perfect, that's okay. We're going to work with that. We're going to fix that. So, okay, one more time. I'm grabbing it really low this time. I try. Okay, one little fragment of dander in there. Okay, it's not so critical. But when I'm working with my deer hair, I want to get it as clean as I possibly can, and I work with it and I comb it, and so now I know. Okay, I'm not coming up with anything more. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the hair stacker, and here's how it works, guys. You take these tips just like this, okay? Get that hair stacker out of the way. You put the deer hair in the deer hair stacker like this. You get all of it in there with the tips down. Always the tips down, guys, and when I pull it out of there, you're going to see why. Okay, so I get it all in there. I kind of swirl it around, and then I just gently let go, and it's, from the moisture from my fingers, some of the hair is wanting to stick. Okay, so there's the hair in the deer stacker with the butt ends sticking out. Here's what we do with the hair stacker. Give it a few taps. Okay, and you can tap it once, you can tap it a bunch. I usually tap it for a good 5 to 7 seconds. Okay, now what we're going to do, and this is the cool part here, watch how this happens, guys. I'm going to turn the hair stacker on its side. Now watch exactly what happens. I haven't dumped it over this way, or I'm holding it perfectly horizontally. Now watch. Look at all those deer hairs down there. Look at all those tips, how they stick out perfectly. If I were going to tie an elk hair caddis, that is exactly the method I would use right there. It comes out nice and clean. All your tips are stacked. Okay. Now let's pull that out of there. And we're gonna kind of inspect it. We're gonna look at it, and we're gonna kind of brush the stuff off. There was some stuff in the stacker there, some dust and stuff. So, okay. So now I'm looking at those tips. They're not really where I want them. You can do this. You can do this, guys. I'm gonna try to hold it over the table so you can see it really good. Okay, there's the tips. Now, I want it better than that. So I'm gonna go at the hair stacker again. Okay, you can do it as many times as you want. You can get that stuff in there to get it just right so that you know it's exactly where you want it. And what I do is I twist it, tap it. Twist it and tap it. That way you know that all those hairs are separating and they're getting right down to the bottom. Let's try it again. Let's see what happens now. There we go. Now look at that. See how all those tips are lined up exactly perfectly? That's what you want right there. Okay, and that is for when you're tying elk hair or deer hair onto a fly. That's how you want it to look right there. Now I'm going to be spinning deer hair onto the hook today for you guys to show you how to do it. So I'm not really actually that concerned about the tips lining up perfectly. I'm just showing that for demonstrational purposes. I'm sorry, I'm trying to move this over to the table so you guys can see. Sometimes it's really hard to see in the video. So I'm just doing this for demonstrational purposes to show you guys how to get your hair to line up exactly perfect. And I'll show you another technique for removing the dander after I've done this here. I'll show you another quick technique for getting the dander out of the deer hair for you guys that don't have the tool, need to get your fly tied right away. I'll show you how to do that. So anyway, Okay, so spinning deer hair onto a hook. You might have heard this term before, and it can really be a pain in the rear if you're trying to do it. It goes everywhere, it goes every which way, and sometimes it can be really, really hard to do and seem very intimidating. Don't let it be. It's very, very simple. It's like anything else. When you've had something explained to you properly, the proper way, then, well, it's easy. You got it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clump of deer hair right here that I've pulled out, and we're going to go ahead and spin it onto the hook. And this is how you do it. Right down. Now you can't see the other because it's hidden, but I can see that this is about the middle point in my deer hair where I want to tie it in. You want to tie it in exactly in the middle from, most of your end butts here and most of your tips there. You want to tie it right in the middle. Now, here's the technique. You don't just lay this stuff up on the hook any which way here. It goes a certain way. It has to be on my side here of the hook, and it has to be pointing at a 45-degree angle down. So the deer hair is pointing this way on my side of the hook and down, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a loose wrap, and this is important, guys. Watch this very closely. The loose wrap comes over the deer hair and traps it pretty much to the side of the hook. Okay, one loose wrap. Now I'm going to apply just a little bit of pressure, guys. I'm going to come around with a second wrap, and I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure. And as I come around with my third wrap, I'm going to go ahead and bind it down. Okay, watch what happens. Here's the magic, guys, right here. Watch this. This is spinning deer hair right here. Boom. Like that. Just like that. See what happened? You take that hair and you move it up there. And now you've got this like ball of hair. As you're coming around with your thread, you want to tie that ball in. So what you're going to do is you're going to wiggle your thread back and forth like this, and you're going to come down in there and you're going to bind that stuff down, okay? And when you bind it down, guys, bind it down tight, okay? So I'm going to bind that down with about 4 or 5 or 6 good wraps. The reason why I'm not worried about laying a lot of thread down in there is because the more black thread you get down in there, the more dense it makes that body down in there. So it looks like that bug is black down in there. And I'm like coming this way, and I'm coming this way with my thread, because when I do that, it's binding all the thread together. It's holding the deer in there, the deer hair in there nice and tight. Okay, so now I've got my ball of elk hair laid down on my hook. Let's go ahead and wrap the thread to the front of the hook and get the thread out of the way. Big wraps, 1, 2, 3, boom, right to the front. That's all we want to do is get it out of the way. Now watch what happens here, guys. Now you can begin to start trimming your deer hair, and you can actually trim your deer hair down to create an abdomen. Okay guys, I've paused a second there because I don't want to have to take a bunch of your time here. You want to get through this video as quick as possible. What I've done is I now have a mess of deer hair. Okay, that's garbage. We're going to get rid of that. But what I've done is I've taken this deer hair and I've trimmed it down, and you can see, you can actually trim this into a shape. And here's another nice thing about the Renzetti, the swiveling vise, is that I can just sit here and just keep clipping on the top. I don't have to go over onto this side or onto the bottom because my vise doesn't swivel. I can see it. So now I can actually trim a nice, tight looking little abdomen here. Okay, now, where do we go from here? Well, we want to spin more deer hair on there because obviously that's not enough, right? So we go back to the hair stacker, and another piece of elk hair, we cut it out like so. Now, I explained to you guys that I was going to show you a trick to get the dander out of there if you don't have the comb. Here it is. Watch this, guys. Okay, I'm going to get my vise out of the way. Here's what we're going to do. I'm gonna hold this thing. This is for when you don't have the comb here. Watch this. You take your fingers down here and you hold these tips and hold them nice and tight, guys. You're gonna lose a little couple of fibers. Okay, I didn't lose any. Now, here's what you do. You hold the butts right at your mouth and you go like that. What that does is it separates it out. Now, can you see that dander sticking out of there? what it does is it opens those fibers up. So now you can get your fingers in there. You can kind of pull some of that fibers out. It's like that. Okay? Grab it by the butts and try to work that dander out. Okay? Pull it out this way. Pull it out. Okay. Now, let's see how I did without the comb. Let's see what I did without the comb. Hardly any dander there. See that, guys? Hardly any dander. So the comb does make doing this a lot easier because you don't have to sit there and, you know, blow your mess of deer hair that you're working with all over the place. You can just kind of do it with your fingers. It doesn't always get it perfectly, but by gosh, if you don't have the tool, it really can make it a little bit more harder. So, okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and spin this on. I want to build up more of my body. Again, I'm going to look at this hair. And this is about the middle point right here. So I'm going to grab this with my fingers here. And I didn't stack it this time because it's really, when you're doing the deer hair, when you're spinning it on there, it's really, honestly, it's not necessary to align the tips because you're only spinning it on. You're going to trim it off anyway. The purpose that I was showing you for aligning the tips is when you're tying like an elk hair caddis, kind of killing two birds with one stone there. And you'll notice this is the bunch of hair that I'm working with. This is how much I'm working with. If you cut off too much, it's really going to make a mess. If you tie off too little, you're going to be at this for 6 hours. So about this much right here is about how much you want. Okay, now when we tie our deer hair on in front of this here, what we want to do is we want to try to get this back, this deer hair back as much as possible. Now, we wrapped some really good wraps on there to secure that stuff really good. So now I know if I really kind of shove on this stuff backwards, it's not going to go anywhere because I got it tied in there nice and secure. So let's undo our wraps. Now we're going to come back in here and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to lay this hair in here at a 45. Do you see the reason why now? Because if I were just to lay this on there, it's going to mix all over in this stuff. So what I want to do is I want to shove this back. We get a great reference point here to start from. We come over it with one loose, another one a little more snug, and you can see it already starting to flare out. And then the third one, and see how I'm dragging it up to my fingers? I'm not coming out here and trapping it in the deer hair. What I'm doing is I'm actually rubbing that thread over my fingers right there and coming back with my third wrap. Here it goes. Ready? Boom. Like that. Boom. Look at that. That's how you spin deer hair right there. And then you kind of work this stuff through there. Okay, now when I go ahead and trim this, you can see how we're starting to really build a really good elk hair body. And now you can see when I trim this stuff up, I won't break this time. I'll show you exactly what I'm doing. You can actually see how now we're really starting to build a body. And it's made strictly out of deer hair. There are some flies that call for nothing but spun deer hair bodies. And that, guys, is how you do it right there. That's how you make a good deer hair body. And that will float. This is an Alec Jackson hook. As I said, it's bigger. I'm only showing this stuff for demonstrational purposes. You can tie this on any size of hook, all the way from probably a 14 or 16 all the way up to this one here. Some of the steelhead flies do call for spun deer hair like this. But there it is, guys, and you know, that's the first few steps. I'm not going to go ahead and wrap all this up. You get the idea, and that's the main thing. That's how we spin deer hair. That's how we do it, and that is how you make a fly that will float on top of the water. Now, when you add your fly floatant, Frog's Fanny is what I use. It's a powder silica-based product. You actually brush it on with a little like fingernail polished brush, or some of them have, you drop the fly in it, you shake it around, you pull it out. Good stuff, guys. When you waterproof your flies like that, Scotchgard, I don't think they sell it anymore. I got a couple of Covert cans out in my back stash that I kept specifically for my flies. So when you waterproof your flies, you got the deer hair, you got a fly, guys, that you're going to be able to throw out there. It's not going to get wet. And if it does start getting wet on you, drop it back down in the frog's fanny, false cast a bunch of times, get it up there, get that thing to dry out, and set it down. I guarantee you, you will not be disappointed. This is the best way to make a floating fly without the use of foam and synthetic materials. This is the real deal here, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this one today. This is one of my favorite things to do, is spinning deer hair, and I really enjoy the elk hair caddisses. And by the way, you guys notice that I always wear my Sage hat in my videos because I really like Sage fly rods. Go Sage! I hope they at some point recognize me and will help me endorse their products and stuff. So anyway, that's it. It's my little plug for Sage there. So have a great day, guys, and that's how we spin deer hair. Thanks, guys.